Hello, everyone, and welcome to the VAPALS-ELCAP OSEHRA Working Group meeting. This is June 12th, 2019, and just to let you know, we will be recording this meeting and putting it on YouTube so that other people can watch it at their leisure. Am I? This is Linda Ya, your host, and that's how Rick usually starts it with, this is your host, Rick Marshall. So I guess this is your host, Linda Ya. So my plan is first to ask if there are questions. We are now going through OSEHRA certification. Yep, it's pretty exciting for us. We've been wanting to do this for quite some time, but we've finally been allowed to, and we're very happy. So first thing, any questions from anybody? And then I'm assuming we still have time after that, which I think we will. I'm planning on doing my presentation that I did last week at the Vista community meeting. So let's go. Anybody have questions that we can answer or can't answer? It doesn't look like it. So I guess, just a sec. Okay, so, oh, push the wrong button. There we go. So I've already told you who we are, or who I am at least. So, um, so we have a mission for our program, and that is to increase access to safe and effective lung screening programs that save lives. This is why we're doing this. And what did I just do? Okay. We'll address that when we're done with the presentation, I think. So these are the members of the VAPALS-ELCAP IT team. I think most of you know who most of us are. Vista Expertise Network is, of course, my company. Paraxial is Rick Avila's company, and he is traveling at the moment, so is able to join us. Hello? Okay. Mount Sinai is...
I still hear you, Linda.
Oh, good. Mount Sinai is the clinical part of our team. They're the ones who basically are telling us what to do, what to provide for them. Developing life-saving protocols, yes. And Mount Sinai has those. So what we're doing is we're making it so that their protocols can be used in the VA hospitals in a effective and efficient manner. We couldn't do this without them. Our clinical team also includes the radiology and some other people from the Phoenix VA hospital. So they've been helping us a lot. And then OSEHRA, of course, is helping us certify and make our software better. They are also providing our Jira instance and our blog, hosting our blog, and basically, oh, and GitHub. Thank you, Rick. And these calls, yes. So they're definitely making this an easier job. So just a little quick statistics information. Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death, and this is among all adult demographics, men, women. And one of the things that's interesting is that not only does lung cancer affect smokers, but it also affects people who have never smoked. This includes people who have been exposed to secondhand smoke and people who haven't been exposed to cigarette smoke at all, but have been exposed to other potential carcinogens. For the purposes of VA, one of their big things that is not generally thought of as a cancer, um, word, uh, cause is burn pits and just basically being in the armed forces. Those guys do a lot for us that is dangerous so that we don't get exposed to those. Um, so it's leading cause of cancer death, but it receives the least amount of federal research funding among the most lethal cancers, I guess. And it has the worst survival rate for 5-year survival rate. So this program, I think, we're hoping will really make a difference in helping with that. One of the parts of the program that we don't talk about very often, but is definitely part of the program, is low dose CT lung cancer screening, which has been around for a little while, but with the help of organizations like Paraxial and just people who work in that industry making efforts, low dose CT lung cancer screening has become a lot more accurate. Um, you can see here the penny and the teeny little rice-like thing. That little piece of rice is about the size of the nodules that we're looking for nowadays for lung cancer screening. It used to be that it wouldn't they wouldn't show up until they were much bigger and therefore harder to treat. CMS is reimbursing for those at high risk getting the lung cancer screening. So that's a good thing. And of course, the earlier you can find lung cancer, the better the survival rate. It's a lot different to treat this very large nodule here on the left than it is this teeny rice-sized nodule on the right. So the main objectives for the VAPALS-ELCAP system, we hope to, actually for our project in particular, is we hope to introduce the management system at 10 VA medical centers. We've got a I'm having trouble with words today. We have an early version of this prototype, early version of the software at Phoenix, which they are starting to play around with and find bugs for us because, of course, anything that's the size of the VA PALS LCAP package, we're only human. We do the best we can, but there's still bugs there. One of the things that another objective of our particular project is to establish a centralized QA program for lung cancer, well, low-dose CT interpretations. Um, so that this here in particular, so there is more than one way to categorize a lung cancer nodule and different protocols to treat them. The two that we're interested in at the moment is the ILCAP program, which is hosted by Mount Sinai and run by Claudia Hinchke and David Yankelevitz, and the LungRads program, which is a pretty well known among lung cancer advocates program, which at the moment I can't remember who provides that. And one of the things we're looking for is we want to see if the ILCAP system causes a stage shift within the VA. So we have people looking at clinical results to see if it really does make a difference to have this kind of program in a VA hospital. So the VAPALS-ELCAP software package. This is where I'm going to get more technical. This is where we're going to kind of look at the architecture and the guts of the software package. This is what the homepage looks like. And if we have time afterwards, if anybody's interested, we can go through some of the screens that the users look at and use. But I won't really be talking about that a whole lot more in this particular presentation. So the VAPALS-ELCAP software package is not huge, but not small by any stretch. As far as users, at the moment, we have 7 clinical forms, 3 TIU notes, and a radiology report, and 6 user reports. The TIU notes and the radiology report at the moment do not go directly to the main production VA Vista system. The users at this point have to copy and paste them into either CPRS or the PACS system. So having it so that they can send that directly to the main production system is something that we will be working on in later versions. Regarding the mumps part of our package, we have 78 mumps routines. Of those, 33 are unit test routines. This is how we make sure that when we've made changes, we haven't broken at least some of the things. We also have 4 non-routine routines. These are ones that are used to document the history of the other routines and to provide information about who's funding it, who's building it, that kind of thing. So they have no actual routines in them. And then we have 41 active package routines. These are the ones that do the work on the mumps and Vista side. These are the ones that communicate with what we're calling external resources here to make everything come up on the web browser. External resources, this is where we're using the technologies that are best for what we need to do. At the moment, MUMPS does not immediately interface with the internet. We do that through the kind of the usual things that need to be used to communicate with the internet, like HTML templates, CSS files, JavaScript, and we also have a Python script to kind of organize part of the program. I think, yeah, I'm not going to ask her questions at the moment because I think I may be answering those in the next few slides. So one of the things that we're introducing with this application is MForm. This is, for those on the technical side, this is the name of this is similar to MUnit, which is the unit test framework, or MWeb, which is the web server framework. Some of the cool things about MForm is that there's no top-down control. You can add plugins to make new applications and new forms, and it's stateless. There's no particular user sessions for this part for MForm. It just, wherever you are in the process, it knows what to do next. And it doesn't care what happened in the past. That's taken care of by the graph stores and the ways that we save the data. This is a diagram that kind of shows how it works. We start with some HTML templates and use those and a get to put together data that we have in the graph store to pre-fill things that we already have, information we already have, and send it to the browser. Once the user has put information into the browser, then we use a post to send that information back to the graph store and also to SAMI, the software package, to have that data transformed if needed. For example, if they use a different format than our standard format for dates, then SAMI will transform that. And since dates are a key in our graph store, in our data, the keys are moved based on the transformed data. And the graph store is where all the data that is specific to the VAPALS program resides. This is the stuff, it's a few things about the patient themselves that, in order to identify them, and then the lung cancer screening information. At the moment, that data pretty much just stays in the graph store, except for what is copy and pasted over to Vista. One of the things we have planned for the future is to be able to send at least some of that data to the VA's Vista system so that doctors can get to that information more directly. So the HTML template generator, let's talk about that for a second. One of the things that is kind of cool, I think, about this program is that when we want to make changes, we do not have to change the HTML template itself. We change the source files that are used to put those templates together. And then the Python script that I was telling you about takes the changed source files and integrates them to provide a new HTML template. So we're just dealing with smaller parts. That's the Jinja 2 parts, instead of having to deal with the whole thing. The watch shell script keeps an eye on those source files so that when they're changed, it automatically runs that Python script. So all that needs to be done by whoever's administering the program is to change the source files. They don't have to change, they don't have to look through lots of HTML code to find the specific thing that they need to change. So here we're talking about the MUMPS process flow. This is the part above the dashed line is kind of how we prepare the MUMPS system to actually have the stuff in it that it needs to start the program. So we're using MUMPS routine to pull information from the VA Vista system using an M2M broker. And we're putting that data into a patient lookup graph store. I should probably mention, most of you may know what a graph store is, but in case you don't, it might be a good idea to let you know a little bit about that. A graph store, and George, please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is an area where I'm a little less sure of myself. But a graph store is a way to store data that is generally the raw data that hasn't been transformed or had any calculations done on it. And it looks a lot like a MUMPS array for the people who know what a MUMPS array is. But basically, one of the things I'm missing here is a little slide that will show you what graph store entries will look like. But basically, they have namespaced variable names that are based on the form themselves, on which form. So the namespace name for the intake form is SI, and for the background form is SB. So that goes at the beginning of the variable name. So that's how we know where that data came from. I think at this point I will stop and see if there are any questions about graph stores. Yeah, I can show some data after the presentation if people would like. So this is kind of what happens when, I'm sorry guys, a little brain pause there. I think I've been going too fast. So this is the part where we select the patient that we're going to work on. The user will enter a patient search string or select from the drop-down menu in the home page, which is the page I showed at the part of this section. That gives them a list of patients that to look at. They select which particular one they want, and goodness. Oh, right. Now I remember. It's been a long week, really. When the patient is selected, at that point, VAPALS reaches out to the Vista production system through the M2M broker and requests more information about that patient. What we store in patient lookup is just kind of the bare minimum, the patient's name, gender, social security number, birth date. When we actually select the patient, if they aren't already enrolled, perhaps if they are enrolled, I should check on that. We request things like their address. When we get that data, then it's updated in both the patient lookup graph store, which is the one that has just that minimum amount of patient data, and the VAPALS Patients Graph Store. This is the one that stores information about the patient that is related to lung cancer screening. So this is kind of how the flow for the user. When they start at the home page. They enter the patient and select the patient. If it's an enrolled patient, then they go directly to the case review page, which is the page that is, it's kind of like a mini catalog for the forms that are available for that particular patient. If the patient is not already enrolled, it goes directly to the intake form, which is the first thing that needs to be filled out to enroll the patient in the program. And these are the forms that we currently have available. So no software package is complete without documentation. I don't care what anybody says. It's just not. How can you use a software package that you don't know what it does? So the current documentation we have is a user manual, and this is mainly for the nurse navigators, the people who actually run the program in the VA hospitals. They're the ones who actually speak to the patients and help them get scheduled, make sure they know where to go, make sure that they get their results, that kind of thing. We also have a technical manual, which around here we like to refer to as the parts manual. And that one is pretty long because we have pretty much everything we can think of in there that could be considered a part of the manual or a part of the program, like routine names, and descriptions, the data dictionaries. Oh, that reminds me, one of the things, numbers that I did not put on that VAPALS by the numbers slide was that we have more than 1,500 variable entries in our data dictionaries. And so each one of those needs to be noted in the technical manual. We also have an install guide that tells you how to use load and use the Docker environment that VAPALS resides in right now. Now, that documentation is not just the manuals and things that go along with the code. Within the code, there needs to be documentation as well. One of the things that we like to provide in our documentation include historical information about what's been done, which includes logs for each of the kind of modules in the application, and also inline documentation, which means that we go through the routines and we note like what's going on there in that particular part, so that if something happens at 2 a.m. and you've got a junior programmer sitting there trying to figure out why something is not working, when they go into the code, they have some help so that they know what's going on in which parts of the code. Next, for the VAPALS-ELCAP software project, we're in OSEHRA certification right now. So Joe and Sam are helping us actually spiff up our code and making sure that it works properly and follows the standards and conventions. While they're doing that, we are writing patch 1 because there's always something that we missed, and development doesn't stop just because we're in certification. However, having certification, they don't like it if the code keeps moving on them when they're trying to certify. I don't know, that seems a little, Yeah. Rick says it's fair. They shouldn't have to try to certify moving code. Um, then we'll be installing the certified software and patch one into the Phoenix test account, and Phoenix will be battering on that for us in beta testing. And once we fixed all those bugs that they find and make sure that it's working for them, we'll be installing it in Phoenix production on a separate server from the Vista production system. And then we will be rolling it out to up to 9 more sites. We have a list, or rather, Ricardo has a list of what those other sites are, but it keeps changing just a little bit as some VA hospitals turn out to be more ready to bring us on than others, and stuff like that. If you want to play around with the software as a user, you can go to our demo site, which is right there, and mess around and make those poor test patients that we have really sick. It's really sad sometimes. um, just a note that all of the patients in our demo system are what are called synthetic patients. You can tell that they're synthetic patients because they have numbers after their names, after their first and last names. These are ones that are created by the Cynthia Project. I'm not going to tell you about that project, but you might want to remember that name because it's a pretty cool project. If you want to see the manuals, including the Docker install guide, you can go to our website here and download them from there. Our code is in GitHub, in the OSEHRA GitHub repository. And if you have questions or find something that you want to let me know about, this is my email address. And that is it for my presentation. So I understand that there was a question in chat
From Arthur
from
about is the
Arthur.
documentation finished?
Ah, um, yes. Well, this is part of the reason why I waited until now to answer your question, since I had an inkling from what the guys here were saying that it was about documentation. Here is the documentation on VAPALS-ELCAP. We don't have documentation in particular on M-Form yet. That is um, that is a new software.
So it's not part of VAPALS-ELCAP is the reason it's not included in the manuals. MFORM is part of the MUMPS Advanced Shell, and the VAPALS-ELCAP software is written to rest upon and rely upon the foundation of the MUMPS Advanced Shell. So as the MUMPS Advanced Shell gets itself closer to a point where we want to open it up for wide use instead of what it is right now, which is for private use for these certain projects. Once we open it up for wider use, then we'll create a suite of documentation for it, and you can learn more about how it works. But the general pattern for MForm is that it responds. It's a plugin to the M web server. It responds to requests. It reaches out to the operating system, fetches the raw HTML form, scans it line by line, and feeds in the data from the graph store that corresponds to the fields that it finds in there. And then it does the converse when it's filing data from the remote site. So it's a pretty neat architecture.
And also, it's kind of new. This is the first, as far as I know, the first project that the second project that MForm has been used on.
Yeah, George has used it before in things like the patient loader and he can talk and other projects as well that he's done. He's been
Right.
developing it for a while. It's a logical fit with MUMPS's kind of database-oriented operations to say
Right.
we need a tool in the middle that swaps data in and out of forms. So George has been working on that for a while. But this is our first time certainly putting it into VA production, I believe.
Right. And then, yes, the there is a Docker app. Um, yeah, that will be included in the where to put custom code in Copper. Arthur wants to know, um, and I don't know the answer to that either. But I do know that you can play around with the software with the Docker install that we have, and it does have MForm in it.
Yes.
Um,
It's under the
but
%WF lowercase namespace. Percent and lowercase is mash, and %W is web tools. So the M web server is under %W, and %WF specifically is MForm.
so, any other questions, Arthur or anybody else? Hearing none. Uh,
What about our certifiers? I see we have Joe on the line
and Joel.
and Joel and Sam sometimes lurks. So I guess one question is, since the call we had yesterday, do you guys have any fresh questions for us that about certifying the software that we can help you with? Joe says, "Where's my mute button?" Okay, well that's cool. You want to run the UI and show them a little bit? That could be helpful for the certification folks. Yeah, a little bit of flow here and what it's for.
It would probably help if I turned my mute off. So yeah, we could do that. Um, I'm using the Avicenna server to do my little demo here. That is the server we use for development. But the server address that I gave you for the demo should have the same software on it, assuming that the guys over there have had a chance to update their environment. But if not, then it's pretty close. So, um, selecting a patient. First thing we're going to want to do, theoretically, is have a patient to work on. A lot of our synthetic patients have already been used and had data put in for them. You can know that they've already been enrolled if they have this VAPALS-ELCAP notation beside their name. But here's somebody who's fresh. Um, let's go with Ms. Fernando Kemmer. So since this patient has not already been enrolled in VAPALS-ELCAP, the first thing that happens is that we are taken to the intake form. The intake form has kind of, in a way, has 3 sections because some of these things are done at different times. One of the first things that happens is that the patient needs to be identified as a potential lung screening candidate. We're not going to. Fernando here is a little over age for the program. I believe it's usually through 74 or 75, but we're going to take her anyway. And we're going to say that she was referred um, last week. Okay, by her primary care provider. And based on the chart review, we're going to say she's eligible. Now, in some VA hospitals, they wanted to track that this part was done, in which case they can click here and they will be given a small TIU note that they can copy over into CPRS. The next section is a pre-enrollment discussion. A lot of times, from what I understand, the nurse navigator will call patients that have been identified as eligible to see if they want to enroll in the program. And so this is what we will be, when we're discussing with the participant, whether or not they want to be in the program, they want to know how that person was reached. Oh, we'll say their telephone. And what, after talking about it, what the patient decided, whether they want to be in the lung screening program, whether they're like, not right now, doesn't fit in my life right now, or no, don't ever talk to me about this again. We're going to say this one is interested, and we're going to say that she has a 35-year smoking history. This is where they'll put other information that may be of interest to the program. And once again, we have a submit button here that will make another TIU note that can be copied over into CPRS. Then the third part of the intake note goes into more depth about about the patient and their smoking history. So you need to indicate whether their address is correct, and you can change it. Um, rural status is determined based on zip code. So, and this is something that the nurse navigator can change, because sometimes there are people who are in zip codes where part of it is urban, part of it is rural, and they may be living 20 miles outside of the main city that they go to get their groceries, say. This is captured because one of our sponsors for this program, besides Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation, is the Office of Rural Health in the VA, and they want to make sure that the rural population is included in this program. And in exchange, they're paying for the nurse navigators. So we need to track that. We'll see. And this is a lot of times, from what I understand, the nurse navigator will ask the questions and kind of type in here what the answers are, because it's faster for them than to go down and fill out each thing. And then after they've talked to the patient, they will go and they will put in the information. So it turns out that this lady thought she has been smoking for 35 years, but she's only smoked half a pack per day. So a smoking year is defined as a pack a day per year would be 1 pack year. She has not quit. We provided a pamphlet to let her know what resources were available. Informed decision-making discussion. This is something that's required by CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and is basically notes that this kind of conversation was engaged in with the patient. And then she's decided to enroll. This is where they put some information about the patient that can go on the TIU note. Say, and she's going to be an active enrollee. And then with all that information filled out, hopefully we filled out all the required information. We're going to submit. And when we submit, it goes through and it checks to make sure that all of the required parts have been completed. If so, then then it comes up with this TIU note for us to copy and paste. And just to make it easy, we have this little button here, which allows us to copy it to our clipboard. Once we're done with that, we can go to her case review page and just, Susan had a question. I'm guessing you are talking about the urban and rural health um, uh, section. Yeah, that is pre-populated. Um, it's just that you're allowed to change it if it turns out after discussing it with the patient that that's not correct. Um, it's based on their zip code, like I was saying, and yeah, basically we take their zip code, run it through our calculator, and it pre-populates that. We aim to make people happy around here. So then uh, there we can request a new form. Huh? Did I submit it? Yes, and we looked at the TIU note. Um, and now we're deciding whether we want to do a new form. And these are your options. Background form is optional, but it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to look at that today since it is optional, but it's about things that are risk factors for lung cancer. CT evaluation form. This is the form that the radiologist fills out after the CT scan has been taken, and they fill this out because it's standardized, and the way that the data is put in, we can make calculations and um, do studies and things like that on the information. One of the things that was kind of trickiest for us is to be able to add up to 10 nodules. And each nodule, you have this list of questions, some that are required, some that are not required, that need to be filled out for each nodule. I do recommend that if you get a chance, you go to our demo site and play around with this, because there are so many combinations that are possible that well, let's just say that lung cancer and lung cancer screening are not simple. There's a lot involved. One of the things about low dose CT scans that's kind of interesting is that they don't just look at the lungs. While you're there are other things in the area that could show abnormalities. So based on the abnormality, you can select one of these sections to fill out to say what the abnormality is. And once that's done, you mark uh, kind of what the end result is of you look for nodules and other abnormalities. This is where you can put the part where you're maybe summarizing what's going on. Here is the approach that you're going to be using. This will mainly, as I understand it, be determined by the uh, medical center that you are with. They will decide whether you'll be using the LungRADS approach or the ILCAP approach. And then here's where you mark when they need to have a follow-up. The approximate follow-up date will be put in there. And this is what's going to help the nurse navigator know what and when they need to schedule what's going to happen next. LungRADS is a way to categorize the nodules. And when the LungRADS program changes their recommendations, which they did recently, then if needed, we will update this section to go along with what their categorization system is currently. It won't let me submit because I've left a whole lot blank, but if I had filled everything in that is required and hit submit, it would come up with a radiology report based on these findings that, like the TIU notes, you can copy and you can paste into the PACS system. And then, as I understand it, the PACS system sends reports to Vista to store. I guess the one other thing to talk about briefly is reports. So of course, when you've done all these forms, we need to keep track of what's been happening and what needs to be done next. So we can pull up a report, and we can change the dates, and it will bring up a list of the patients that fit those criteria. Each of the reports, of course, is a little different. Um, some of the ones that I think might be most important for the nurse navigators, for example, are the participant follow-up, which says when someone needs to be seen again, and for what. Um, the ones that were perhaps scheduled for CT evaluation or were enrolled but have not yet had a CT evaluation, and ones where maybe you haven't quite finished your work for a particular patient. These are forms that are not complete. And I think I've touched on pretty much everything that is user-facing in the VAPALS software package. So, any other questions? Okay. Well, at this point, I'm tired. And we're pretty much out of time. So I'll give you guys 4 or 5 minutes back for your day. Use it wisely. And we will see you next time we have something to show you guys, or if, well, hopefully next week. Yeah. Oh, Rick has things to show next week. So we should be seeing you next week. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you later. I will put those links, by the way, into the OSEHRA blog for VA Pals so that if you didn't catch them when I had them up, you can get them there. And I will also put up the link for this recording once I've had a chance to convert it and upload it. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.